Hey everyone, Tim Higgins here with ANI Solutions. I'm going to talk about DevTest today. And in DevTest, we're going to talk about filters, assertions, and scripting 101. Now, I'm not going to get detailed in scripting because there's a lot of information you can get from scripting. There's a lot of places you can do scripting. And there's a lot of functions inside the scripting languages. I'm going to say that vaguely. You'll see what I mean shortly. That you can actually do things with. Today, we're just going to barely touch the surface on it. In the future, I may do a more in-depth video on doing scripting, just so you can kind of see some of the things you can actually do with it. So now again, we're covering filters, assertions. Those are going to be our main focus, and scripting 101. Now I may just go through the slide deck and then we'll jump into it. So we're going to talk about what are filters and how to use them. Okay. We're also going to talk about in order to use filters, you really need to know what properties are. And to use properties, the best thing to do for that is to understand. So we're going to look at that as well. So I was thinking the best thing about properties is understanding how they're used, right, in your property files, how global properties are used, how non-global properties are used, so, or what we'd call local. So we're going to look at that as well. Then we're going to cover assertions, okay? Assertions really is what it is. So let's go back up here. So filters are mainly used, I'm just reading off the slide here, are mainly used to set properties. A filter can be applied as a global filter or a step filter. And we're going to look at that. So basically you want to think as a filter as just a placeholder for your values, right? And like I would think as properties or something like that in coding, it's really just a way to hold your values that you want to share throughout your flow. Now, assertions is what it is. I'm not going to read this one, but assertion really is just a test, right? So I'm going to say, does user equal Tim? The downside about assertion is it does have to return true or false. So you always have to pay attention to that, okay? And then, of course, introduction to scripting. We're going to talk about scripting. The scripting inside DevTest really is Groove, JavaScript, Bean Shell, and Velocity. Now, I've never used Velocity. Groovy is almost like JavaScript, so you'll recognize that if we get into it. And again, I may do a more detailed video later. JavaScript I've been using probably for as long as I can remember, and to me it's probably one of the most known. And you can use other tools to save your script, but unfortunately you can't test them because you wouldn't have the DLLs for DevTest. Now, if you wanted to do that, you could go through the cumbersome of doing that, but it may be an overkill for what you're trying to do. Now, Bean Shell to me was one of the most common because that was the one that was most advertised when I first started using DevTest. Bean Shell really is just a version of Java, okay? You can Google it. In fact, we probably will, so you can see some of the commands. And I've never used Velocity, so I'm not even going to pretend to even know what that is. Yes, I can Google it, but I know a lot of languages, and that's just something I just don't care to learn. Now, there was a setting that I was reading that you can change the setting for the language. There's a way to set the default setting in your property files. So if I want it to always be JavaScript, then I can do that. But the other thing too is I saw somewhere that you can change it to Python, which would be really cool because I'm a big Python programmer. But anyway, so some of the commands we're going to cover, there is a lot of commands, and that's what I meant earlier. We're only going to touch the surface. So there's test exec, which to me that means execute. I'm assuming it means the same thing here. So there's get state object, there's get state string, get state integer, and then there's parse and state. Now I'll probably talk more about these, but just so you know, the get state means get its current state. Now we're talking about filters at this point, okay? And you're going to see that, so I'm kind of jumping, but you will see this in action, so don't worry about that too much. Now, when you look at these, so get state object, that means I'm getting the state of just an object. I know that's kind of vague what I said, but if you read the next one, it makes more sense. So get state string means I'm getting the value of a string. Get state integer means I'm getting an integer. The last one is if I'm getting a value of a property, it's best to get it in its parse state, because that means as it's changed, as the service is running, I want that state. Okay, so we're going to talk about all these. I know they mean nothing to you right now. That's why it's 101, but I just wanted to cover it because that's what we're about to look here in a few seconds. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump into it. Now I have this little Python script here. This is completely irrelative, but it's just a web page. I'm going to run it, And the only thing it's going to do is going to run it in localhost. Everything I'm doing for sake of argument is localhost here. So my port is 8000. This is just a simple little REST call. It's going to take a REST data and it's going to return a REST data, but we're going to use it as our testing bed. So over here, we're going to start with a fresh project. I'm going to say new. We're really going to start from scratch, okay? And we'll call this delete, just so I know this is a delete me project. And I don't like spaces. Apologize, I'm going to adjust the mic a little bit. There we go. So delete, we'll just call it filter. F-I-L-T-F-I-L, if I can spell, filter demo. And I want that on my desktop so I can delete it. I have one here called, oops, well, I already have one. So let's create a new one. Yeah, let's create a new one. So please delete me. There we go. Okay, very not professional. Do not use my naming conventions, but if you've seen in my videos, most of them are not, because that's not what we're covering. When you create your project, it gives you a template, and we're not doing project creation 101. I've done other things for service virtualization. I may do one, I don't know if I did videos on the workstation, but I think I did. If I didn't, we'll go back and do those, okay? But this is your basic layout. So what I want to do is I'm going to create a recording, and I want we'll give it something useful. We'll call it filter. Again, I don't like spaces. This is going to be my image, right? My VSI. So we'll just call it filter image. We'll say save. And you can put these in wherever you want to, okay? Like I could stick them in virtual services if I wanted to, but I'm just going to put it right here on the root, okay? If we import traffic, I think I covered all that in another video, at least I know how for our customers. This is going to be an HTTPS. I'm going to export this traffic. Let's call it traffic, because that's what it is. And this is going to be my model. So we'll just call it filter model. Okay, and that's kind of important because that's what's going to be on the portal when we deploy it. So everything's good there. We're just going to say go. Now here we're doing localhost. And I think we'll leave the 8, that's fine, but I think it's 8000, right? Wasn't that the default port? So, yep, 8000. We're going to listen to 8001, and we're just going to say go. And now we're listening. So I'm going to pull up this app. I have a better app from API Strong. I just don't have it installed. So we're going to pull up our handy dandy Postman. And here I have 8001. That's where I was testing this earlier, and it's calling the right method. I can verify that by looking here, okay? And now, truthfully, I could use this WSDL if I wanted to create one, but we're kind of just trying to start from scratch. So what we're going to do is go from here, and my body, so I'm using this bookstore, okay? And the reason I'm using this bookstore is because if you use this URL, we're going to talk about this in a few minutes, okay? And this is how, well, we'll talk about it when we get to it, okay? But I'm using this data off of this website, okay? This has been recorded, so you can copy this and just, you know, if you still can't find it, reach out to me and I'll send it to you. But, you know, just copy this URL, and that's the one we're going to use. So let's go back over here to our workstation. And we should be recording, now recording traffic. So let's go to our Postman. I just like to verify that I'm still recording. And I hit send, and it just returns back the data with a success status. Now, if I go over here and look, minimize all this because I don't care, and minimize this because I don't care, I do have my method, right? So we're just going to say next. And again, I'm not going to get into details what this is. If you don't know, watch one of my other videos. What we're going to do is we're going to open these up just so I can work on them and hit finish. And now we have our new recording. Now, with this is our method, get information. Here's the data that it captured. Notice most of it's magic strings. I don't really care about that for now. This is the model. Now, the model is very important, and we'll go through this piece by piece here shortly because you kind of need to know where it is so you know where to put assertions and your filters and where to put your recordings, right? But what I'm going to do is I'm going to test this first. So I'm just going to run it. And what we're going to do is I like to kick off this automation. This is the ITR. Again, I think I have in a video. I'm going to say automatic execute. So it's going to wait for a response. Okay. And I'm just going to run this again. And that should give us a response. Did I change the port? No, that's fine. Oh, there it goes. It just took a few seconds to kick in. Okay, so it just took a few minutes to kick in, and now it's working just fine. So that's what I expect. Okay, and then let's go ahead and stop it from here because it gave me my results. Now, I'll go ahead and say, okay, oops, I stopped it. That's why you got the error, but notice the first listener, it kind of goes back into a loop the second time because it's still listening. You can run these at once, and we're going to do that in a few minutes, and you'll see how. The one thing I want to do, let's get rid of this. So you notice I got the success and everything's good. Now, I want to slow down a little bit. I kind of just moved fast because I want to create this. The one thing I want to talk about right now is your properties. Okay, notice this is kind of orange. And if I go over here to my properties, I have these greens and yellows. Okay. If I remember correctly, a green is an addition. So as it moves to these, it's going to add. Okay. Yellow means it updated the value. So most efficient to efficient. Now, if it was red, that means it called an error. Okay. So green is addition. Yellow is an update or change. So the previous value was efficient. The now value is most efficient. And again, if it was red, it would just be a bright red. Now, these are properties. Now, what I like to do is sort by them so I can see them. Okay. So I can see these are the, excuse me, these are kind of what I call the global properties. Okay. And we'll get to those in a few minutes. You'll see them right here. So global properties. And as you can tell, there's a whole bunch of them. The nice thing is you could actually use those, but you got to be careful because then you talk about scope. Okay. And we'll get to that in a few. So let me go ahead and drop this down. If I go over here to my properties file, I can see these right here. Now, the best thing about this is if I take this file, and what we're going to do is just paste it in there. We'll give it a new name. That's fine, copy of. And let's say I now move this to a server. So we'll just say, 127.0.0.1, right? Localhost. And now click away to change it. Now I have two property files. Well, now all I gotta do is make this one active, and now I'm pointing to a new server. Okay, so we'll go back and point to this one, make active, and we'll delete this one because I don't really care. Now here, all I did was right click and make active. Now these are properties that you can create and modify. So if I need a new property, I would just click down here, and these are key value features. So kind of like a dictionary, if you will, if you're a developer. So let's delete that. I'm going to hit save because we're going to do this in a few seconds. Remember, I said you need to know properties to understand filters. So we'll go ahead and save this, even though I didn't do anything to it. The one thing I can do, which is really cool, is we're going to create a test. Yeah, it's fine. It just says it was created outside the editor. I don't know who did that, but don't really care. So we'll hit save. And I'm going to say, well, what is your problem? Do you want to reload the file into this editor? Well, yeah. Now, if I click away, is it going to do that again? That's a first. Let's just say no. I'm not sure what that is doing. It's saying something is modifying the file. Let's go ahead and close it. There we go. Okay. I don't know what it was doing. It's just being wacky because nothing's modifying the file. But what we want to do is create a test now. So create a new test. Now, again, I'm going to stick it in here, my test folder. Okay. And I'm going to call this run demo. Okay. It could be called anything, right? So in my run demo, this is where it gets kind of cool because you're going to now create a test to test your recording that you just created. So I'm going to just right click. Now notice there's a lot of tests that you could create. The one we care most about is this rest step. So we're going to click on it. Now, what I'm going to do is go over here and steal this, copy, paste, and now notice it picked up everything for me. Okay, and common sense, right? So if I have users and things like that, what I do need to do is pass in content. And even though this is JSON, I like to leave it as text just for now because it makes it a little bit easier to read. So this is my body. The reason being is because this is a string. And if I go to actual JSON, it puts it into a tree diagram like this. Some people like this better. I'm old school. I like my raw JSON. Now notice even when you click raw, it's still flat. So I like to move it to text. Well, now I already messed it up, didn't I? That's okay. So we'll leave it at JSON since I messed it up, and we're good to go. Now, let me go ahead and save this. The trick is now I'm not deployed, so I can't test this. There is this really cool feature right here, think time. So if I change this to seconds, so let's put it on 20 seconds, right? We can count to 20. And we want it to run up to maybe 30 seconds, okay? So we'll go ahead and save this. And I think I do a video on think time. So I've done a lot of webinars, and I've done a lot of videos, and I don't know what's out on my channel. I'll have to go back and revisit because there's a lot of the stuff I've done for customers that I need to go back and say, okay, this is what this does. But again, it doesn't make sense if I'm doing it to you and you don't have a reference to it. But what I want to do now is I want to run this to actually run this. Now the key is if I hit here, the ITR, it can't run it because this isn't running, right? And then if I hit the ITR here, I can't go back and run this because you can only run one ITR at a time. But what you can do is do a quick stage. So now that that's there, I'm going to right click and I'm going to say stage a quick test. I want it to run once. I don't want it to repeat. And now I'm going to say go. Now I've got, as soon as I say go here, go, I've got 20 seconds to go over here and run this. So let's go ahead and run it. We'll restart it. And that's why I said 20 seconds and not 10, because that gives me a few minutes to get to it, right? So I kind of did this fast, so hopefully I don't have a boo-boo. Oh, is it running? Sorry, now it's running. I might have missed the test, see, because I was talking. So let's give it a second. I probably missed it. So let's do that again. Nope, there it goes. Okay, cool. So now it's just running through the tests. Perfect. And now it's waiting again because our test is done. So I'm going to hit cancel. That's going to give me an error. That's fine, just because I canceled it. Yep, that's fine, just because I manually stopped it. And then I don't care about the test run itself, but if I wanted to, I can go over and look at certain events and things like that. I don't really care. What I care most about is just running that test. So now what we're going to do is talk about filters. So if you remember, excuse me for a second. I'm really hoarse today. I must have done a lot of talking. So if you remember, I said you have these global parameters. What we're going to do is we're going to insert something fun just for testing. It is an output message. Okay, so output log message. And we'll just name this message 1 just for fun. Okay, and basically all it does is it just logs something that you can see. Okay, so we can just say hello world. Okay, and I'll prove it. So we'll go ahead and save it. What we'll do, we're going to stage this again. So we'll stage quick test, uncheck, go. So now we've got 20 seconds. Oops, sorry, I got to hit run. So let's go over here, and now I've got 20 seconds. What I normally do is turn off that one checkbox, so I don't have to do that every time. I'm going to reset my run and set it to automatic. And now we're just going to wait 20 seconds. And this time, we should see a little bit different results. So just patience. So. Oh, you know what I did do? Okay. Now this won't work the way I want it to, because I want this to be tested. I'm sorry, I was just thinking about that. Because if I go over here and look, it's probably not going to pick up my message because that's in the testing and not in the VSI. So what we did was just test the VSI. Okay, so to do that, what we're going to do is deploy this. So I'm going to right click here and say deploy. Now, filter model's fine. I'm going to put it in something called demo, okay? And I'm okay with that. So, yeah, so that's good. So we're just going to keep it stupid simple, right? So deploy, it's deployed. I'm running this local host, so my session has expired. We'll log in, we'll refresh. Okay, and now it's running on 8001. And I'm going to check this auto refresh. I hate this auto refresh. You may like it. But when you're not testing, it's fine because it just refreshes this page. But when you're testing, sometimes it refreshes while you're trying to look at it. and it kind of locks it up. To me, it's just easier to click that button. Let me phrase that. It doesn't lock it up. It just kind of puts in that waiting stage till it's done. So let's go ahead and go back over here. Now, the truth is I can close some of this. So we can kill that because we're not using that anymore, which means we can kill this because we're not using that anymore. And let's go ahead and clear out our ITR because we don't want to make sure it's running. Okay, so we're good there. A lot of times you can hit this, and if you have an extra one, it will show up there. That's how you know. Okay, and we're going to go ahead and close this, and we're going to get rid of our quick stage because now we're going to be running it ourselves. So what I'm going to do now is just run it from here, and we'll say go. The reason being, well, what happened? I had an error. Let's see what happened. URL not found. That should have been pointing to localhost. Oh, my port is probably. Oh, remember we changed this. So let's go ahead and look here. Yep. Let's go ahead and say localhost, even though technically that probably should have worked. Let's go ahead and save it. And my port. Let's see. I can do that over here. Let's go ahead and go here. And let's go to our URL. So localhost 8001. Let's make sure that's correct. 8001, that is correct. If I hit refresh, oh, I did get a connection. I just didn't like the way it was, so that's fine. So let's go ahead and reset the counter. You don't have to, I just kind of like to. And now let's go ahead and run it and see how it has that one up error that I was just saying. That's fine. We'll go ahead and just run the same one again. And we'll just say go and see what happens. Why am I getting this URL message? So, but here's our hello world. And I should be getting my, give me 1 second to debug this. My response code 404 shouldn't be 404. So let's just delete this and we'll add another one because I was talking and playing. So let's make sure I didn't screw something up in the process of doing it. And if you all might have saw what I did, but I did not. So let's grab our postmon. Let's test it from here. Yes, okay, so that worked because I stopped the service. There's something about, let's see, this, when I made this change, it didn't like this. So let's go ahead and save this, localhost, save, make active. I'm going to close this and reopen it because it really is being crazy. Oh, it might have been because it was still running. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, and let's minimize this and let's go back to my workstation. And the one thing I like about these videos, a lot of times, I need to speed it up a little bit because I didn't look at myself when I started this timer, but I want to make sure we have enough time to get to everything. Now, the one thing that, let's go and make that active. And now let's go to here and let's just test it real quick. Go. Ooh. Well, that's IIS. That's not what I wanted. Did I not change this? Let's see, localhost. Oh, it didn't change the new settings. See, it went. It hit the IIS one, which is kind of cool, but we didn't change this. So let's go over here and grab this. Okay. If you didn't know, that was the default page for IIS when you don't have a default page. So let's go ahead and save, and now let's run this one again. Let's use the same one. Go back. Set to automatic. And it's having issues finding our page. So here, let's create a first one. What does this look like? Okay, it is localhost. Let's go ahead and close that. And it's having problems finding this one. That's what maybe we should redeploy it. But let's see, 8001, which is odd because it works from here. Postmon, 8001, get information, send. Okay, unfortunately there's no get, so I can't pull it up in the browser. It's just a quick little portal thing that I made. So let's go here, back to here, add a web step, rest. I want it to, oh, you know what I didn't change was this, post. That's probably our problem. Why didn't you say something? And of course I'm kidding, but let's go to here. Let's grab this, paste, and I can test it real quick. And it tested just fine. That's what this little button right here does. Execute it, and that worked. So I'm good. So now if we run it, it was just that one little thing. Now it works. Success. Okay, great. So now we can get back to our message. All right, now we can get back to the actual demo. So sorry about that. Of all that, I knew that was a post, and there's no, I even said that, there's no get method. But what we're going to do is, to save sake of time, when you go to add a filter, if you look at all these are your filters and your assertions. Okay, and those are two things we want to talk about. Now, with saying that, if I click here on the white page, I can create global filters and global assertions, right? Now, one thing we want to look at is, let's go ahead and run this so we can grab our data. Now, granted, I can do it over here, but we're going to close this because it's not Broadcom. And we're going to click on this. We're going to do it Broadcom way. We're going to click on this. And here I can go to my, is it still there? Yep, still there. So we're going to grab this. I'm going to copy it. And I'm going to stick it in a notepad so I can see my data. Now, this is where it gets kind of fun. If you remember earlier, I said we have these properties, right? And these properties. And we could use these properties. I can also hit this filter and say, oh, oops, I can sort these by what I want to look at. So if I have hidden properties, but the truth is I like all properties, okay? These are all the properties I can use. What we're going to do is we're going to grab this payload and display it. So let's go ahead and collapse that in, and we'll collapse that in. And what I want to do by that, if you remember in our properties, we can hit add, and I'm going to create one, just call it payload. Whoops, I like to use lowercase. It's kind of a Python thing. So all caps to me would tell me that it's global, right? So what I want to do though is I want to get the payload, and then you'll see in a few minutes there is a thing where you do the payload length. Okay, so we'll grab that payload length, and then we'll go ahead and let's say, what if we want the price? Okay, now I'm going to make everything be payload, so price. Okay, and then you have to have a length, so you'll see that Y in a few minutes. Payload price length. Okay, and then for kicks and giggles, I'm not sure, but we'll go ahead and just say payload body. Okay, now what I'm going to do is save that. The reason I say this is because I have some pre-written scripts to speed this up a little bit. So now if I go over here and look at my properties, and if I hit sort, I should see the ones I just created. Now let's let it refresh. There we go. Sometimes you have this little refresh thing up here. But here's the ones we just created. Perfect. So now what if I add that message back? So I'm going to say add. So say I can add a filter, add a session, and all that right here. But what I want to do now is inside the message, we want to display just the data. Okay. So let's give that a try and see what we get. Okay. So what we want to do is, where's my next step? Oh, for next, let's do it this way. I like doing it this way. I don't know why. It's going to connect it automatically. So let's go to utilities and let's write an output message. And here we're going to get rid of this. And I'm going to cheat because, like I said, this is going to be time consuming if I don't. I'm going to go over here and in my use folder, I have this message. I think it's this one. We'll come back to that one in a second. I have for demo, and I have message 1. This is what I want. So we're going to talk about these as well. Okay. So now I'm going to paste that there. So data found, it's going to tell me my payload because we created the variable. I also want to know the price. Okay. So books found where price is over $10. So what if I want to do some kind of logic on my payload? That's interesting. But then I also want to write out some of the global variables, my Lisa home, my location. I can do user, any of these variables you can do, right? And I can just drag it over if I want. Some of these you can drag over. I should be able to drag it over. If I can't drag it over, you can on the scripting side. I thought you could on the messaging. That's okay. So let's run it and see what happens. I know what's going to happen, but let's see what happens. So let's go to ITR, and we're going to just reset this, and we're going to say go. Okay, now we're on an output message, Now, if we noticed here in our message, it did write out the global variables, but it didn't write out these variables. The reason being is because we didn't put in our filters. So let's create some filters. So the first filter, when I click on this plus, there are a lot of filters you can create, okay? One of them is store step response. Save property file. Let's see what this does. Now it wants to know where do you want to say it. So let's try payload. Let's see what we get when we do that. Let's go ahead and save it, okay? And what we want to do is run it again. And let's just go ahead and restart this and say go. So now we're on our message. Now our message, look at that, it wrote out the actual payload to our screen. That's pretty cool. So now I can get what the JSON is written out. Now you'll see when we talk about the scripting that you can actually do that to a log file. So we'll get that in a few minutes. But notice our books isn't still working. All right, so let's go look at our books maybe. So here's where it can get kind of fun. Now, if I go back to here, and if I add one, I have this thing called JSON path filter. Now we're looking at something unique. Here, I have, let's remember we had a payload underscore price. Now this says the length. Remember when I said you need to know the length? So that's going to go here inside that. Can I drag and drop that? Nope, that's okay. Payload underscore price length. Just be careful, make sure you don't type it funny. But what is this? So here, let's put our properties together. Here I have the actual payload broken down so I can see it. Do I want price? I think I can click here and click here. Oh, maybe not. Okay, but here's where this page comes into handy. In this little, again, JSON, curiousconcept.com is what I use. If you come in here and grab your payload, where's my payload? What am I looking for? Oh, yeah, here. If I go in here and grab the payload, which we have in a text file, right, here, and we paste it here, then we can start building out our expressions. Now, the truth is that's where this comes in at. So let's use this payload because this is what's been passed in. Okay, and now in here, it's kind of like a regex in a way. But the truth is, it's just JSON path expressions. So if I'm looking for a book title, let's try to grab that. Process it. Here's a book title. Now, if you know anything about JSON, this tells me to start with a store. So the dollar dot means start at the root. Store, book is an array, and I want the first one, which is here, so it gave me back this title. Now, what if I want to figure out some kind of math, right? And that's what we kind of did here. So if I did book price, so what are we looking for? We are actually looking for, let's see if I can do this, data.store, because ours is going to start with the data, book, and I think it's, let's see, well, let's go over here and look here. I think they had the example in here. Yeah, we want something like this, okay? But ours is going to have the word data in front of it just because that's how it's returned. So let's go back over here and paste it there and run it. So here, this tells us all the books that are greater than $10, where the price is greater than $10, okay? That's awesome. That's exactly what we want. So let's grab that. And that's what's important to know this page, right? After a while, you'll get used to doing it. And I keep clicking this, sorry, that's what's recording this video. But if I go here and we go back into here, and for some reason I lost my filter, and we paste it there, the only thing I know for a fact is that we're gonna need the word data in front of this, and $1 sorry. It's gotta be data.store, okay? Because if you looked at ours, it actually has this data here. That's why I said that. All right, so that should be what we need. So let's save it. That's gonna give us our price. That should give us our, so here, books found where price is over $10, and I want to return the payload price. Now, it won't be the price. It's going to actually be the books, okay? So let's go ahead and run this and see what we have. Okay, and put it to automatic. And it's working on message. And look at that. Perfect. We got an array back of 2 books that are over $10. So that's awesome. So what we did is we looked at our JSON payload, which is here. We did some math on our value, and we just wrote it out to here. Now you could write that to another value. Goodness, excuse me. You could write that to another value if you wanted to, or you could write it to a message log or something. So at this point, you can actually do something with this data. We also have our global parameters. So let's look at a few other things. So the other thing I want to look at is a little bit more in depth. So I want to look at this before we do our assertion. I actually want to look at a little bit of scripting, okay? So the scripting is going to be kind of fun. There is this thing called, is it utility? No, it's going to be down here in custom. You want to use this execute script JSR223. And that is our scripting. Notice it's here, bean shell. This is faster. This is your local properties, but I want all global properties, which it popped up. If I give myself some real estate, you'll see that. I'm going to minimize that, bring this over, and there we go. So there's a couple things that we need to talk about. If you remember earlier, so let's just test it first. Return hello world, our good old hello world. Now, unfortunately, you always have to end bean shell with the semicolon. If you were using Groovy, you don't have to do the semicolon, okay? But we're going to stick with bean shell because it's Java based and you have to have the colon. Now, if you want to know some things about like ifs, cases and all that, how they work, just Google bean shell. They have a really good documentation out there on that. Now I can hit test here. The result is hello world. But let's go ahead and try it in our ITR. Whoops, let me save it. Just to make sure the whole flow works together. We're going to restart over and go. And now we got our message. Give it a few seconds. There's our data found. And here's our hello world. Okay, cool. So we're good there. So now let's go ahead and stop the test, drop this in, and we're going to do some more scripting. So if you remember from the PowerPoint, let's get rid of this. There's a couple commands that are pretty cool. So we'll say complete payload equals. Now, the other thing too, this is bean shell, so we can actually say this is a demo for scripting 101. And now we could use single quotes like this for comments, or you can do the whole block comment thing if you wanted to. I like to do the block when it's a title, like that, okay? And then here, I got an error because I didn't finish this with a semicolon. So we can say that equals test exec dot, we want to get state, oops, lowercase get state value. Now here, it knows you're passing in a property. So you don't do it with the curly brackets. You just do it this way with semicolons. Curly brackets, I mean these things, right? So that should get me, and I have to end the string. There we go. So that should give me the payload, and it's going to dump it into a variable called payload. Now I want book price. And here, I'm just going to copy and paste just to make it easy. Okay, and this was payload underscore price. And then we're going to return, we'll say complete load equals, let's do my funny equals I like to do, plus, so this is just basic coding here, complete, which means I'm concatenating with a plus sign. And this is going to be my first variable, so payload plus books over, let's make a period there, books over $10 equal, I don't know if I can do an equal sign, equal, close that off, plus, this is our payload price. So what was it called? Book price. You know, let's just call it books. There we go. Because it's not really the price of the books. So books, and then we'll close that off. And then there we go. Okay. So now we're going to save this, make sure we don't have any errors. You'll see the quiggly line if you had the errors. This is your scripting tool. Here's your parameters. Again, if you do the test properties, you get all of them. If you're using only your custom ones, like in this one, I could run this one just fine. But if you're wanting to do logging, then you'd want to do this one. And we'll talk about logging in a few minutes, but logging really is just log. And it will pick up the global parameter for logging. Now let's go ahead and again save this, and we'll run it in our ITR. And we'll jump back and say go, and give it a few. And there we go. So here's our scripting. We returned here, complete load. Here's our complete load. All the way to here, books over $10. Here's my funny little equal sign. And then it lists out the books. So that's just a quick introduction to scripting. Like I said, I will probably do a more in-depth scripting for you, but that's the one for now. And again, I'm looking at these right here. So let's go ahead and look at this parse and state, because the parse and state is very, it's one that you're probably gonna want to use, because what if my variable is changing? So what we'll do is we'll just add another scripting here. So after scripting, I'm going to add another custom script. Again, these are like, you don't want to use this anymore. It's going away. It's because you can pick it from here. And then over here, there's ways of moving this around to get real estate. So, because we're not going to do anything on that one. So let's just do this to get some real estate here. I don't close it all the way because it gets kind of tricky trying to get it with the mouse. But what we want to do here is, put your title. This is another test script. You don't have to have a title. It's just best practice, right? And just to prove that you could use both, we'll do it that way. And then we'll say from here, we're going to actually add the logger for this one, logger.info. So you can do debug, you can do warning, you can do all that stuff. And this is oops, it just has to be, I want lots of real estate on this. I'll close it back so we can get to it. But this is a demo from Tim, okay? And then from here, I can add plus, what is it, test exe, c dot, I don't know if I want to write the whole payload. That gets pretty nasty, but I guess we could, right? Well, you know what? Get state. Let's just grab the other one real quick. That's going to throw an error until I double click on this one. And then on this one, I can grab, let's just grab this right here. Just save us from typing, that's all. So we'll go back over here, and let me make some of these properties smaller so I don't need that whole window. There we go, and we're good there. Very important to make sure you close this. It says this is an error log. Oh, it needs another one of these. Okay, there we go. So that will write it to a log file. The log file is on your default logs. In this case, it's going to be in the workstation log, and you'll actually see that in there, which is kind of cool. So what we're going to do is go ahead and go to the next one. So that's logger. Here, let me think. There's a reason I'm doing this one. So, yeah, so let's just do this. Let's grab the other one again. Let's just start with this one. And I'm just going to grab this, just again for sake of typing. I'm going to paste it there. And what we want to say is we're going to change this to price right here. Well, we don't have to. Let's just leave it as is. But this time we're just going to return price, or not price, I'm sorry. I keep thinking I'm going to do something with the price, but I'm not. So I'm going to return books. Okay. And it needs to be closed off. And that should be it. Okay. So, but what I want to change though, instead of get value, I want to parse in state. Okay. And I'm going to explain where this comes into play in a few seconds. Now, what if I wanted to do something like add my location path to this load? So path equals, let's go and grab this. And here, and let's just say Lisa user. There we go. Now, that will probably error because it's looking for the property. But what I could do is, well, let's try it. right? And what happens if I test? Okay, well, I didn't get an error, but what if I return path? Test. Okay, see, it doesn't know what that is. So it returned Lisa user. But what if I did this? Now I have a huge error, right? Because it doesn't know what that is, remember? This is where the parse and state comes in handy. Now, if I remember, again, I will do this more detailed in another video because I'll have to test that out. But if I remember, it's just that. But the point is, it doesn't know that value until it's ran. So that's the whole point of that one, is it gets the value to some of those when it's actually ran. In this case, it's running. Now, let's see. It may just tell me, if it tells me Lisa, then we'll have to, yep. So it wants to know, so it would have to be done in the curly brackets. But that I'm not too worried about because we'll get with that one with another video. But that's the whole point of the parse and state. Now, with that, let's go back to here and let's just return books because I don't care. I think the parse and state has to be, I think it has to be this. It's been a while. I'll have to play with it and see. And then we can say, yeah, let's just see what we get. It'll probably yell at me, but let's see. Okay, give it a second. That's this one. Now this one's going to execute. And it errored out. Yeah, so it doesn't like that. So either way, I'd have to play with that one and get that one to work. So, but I don't really care. But that's how that works, is the parse and state means give me, like, when it's run, when it hits this, what is the value at that point? So I could change payload here. I could change the price here. And then here, it's going to say, give me, let's say I change the price here, and I change the price here, and it has a default price. It's going to take the one from here. Okay. But what we're going to do now is do something kind of fun. So we're going to do one more thing. What if I add an assertion? Now I can do it over here. I can have a global assertion. But what I want to do is just do one off this file right here. Again, I could just say add assertion. Or I can just right click and say add assertion. So what we want to do before I do that, I want to add one more step. And we'll just call this one a message step. Utilities, we'll say message log, and we'll just call this one oops. Okay, oops. Now, when this one finishes, I don't want it to go here. I want it to end the test. So now we have this log here that does nothing but says oops. But what I want to do is add an assertion. I can click anywhere on this, add the assertion. We're going to add a JSON insertion. Now, the JSON, sorry, my mouse moved away. The JSON has 3. One of them I can verify does the schema match. So if I have a default schema and I have to make sure that JSON matches the schema, then you could easily put it that way. You also have a contains. Does it contain a certain value? In this case, though, we want it to say equal. Okay. Now, this part you should almost you should be able to see that one and recognize it. So because with that one, it does a lot of like the other one did. So for an example, if we wanted to test the price, and what I mean by the other one is this should look familiar, this path, right? So I'm going to take a shortcut, and I know there's 3 dots to get me there to my array. And I want to make sure book 1 price is equal to, I don't have that memorized. So book equal to $8.95. Okay, so that's what I want to test. And then here in my log, I'll just say check book price. And then up here, sorry, hit the mic. Up here, we'll just say check price on book. That way I can recognize it. And just for kicks and giggles, I'm going to say if true, go to output error message 1. There we go. So what we're saying, in this case, it's going to pass. So if it passes, go here. Okay, but we want it to fail. So let's fix that. So, and we want to move it up in the chain too. There we go. So I want it to run first. I want it to say if it doesn't exist. If that's not true, go to my error message. Well, you're not going to see the error message. So let's say true first. So let's go ahead and save. And what we're going to do is kick this one off. We're going to start it over. Sorry about that. And now we're going to run this through and hit OK. Let's see, we need to look at our script. That's not correct. And a payload, output. So let's go to our properties. It didn't come here, so it means it didn't fail, but I think, let's go look at that real quick. Okay, so first of all, who didn't do right? You're fine. You didn't do right. So why didn't you do right? Payload price is not right. Not sure what happened to this one. I'm not sure I care, be honest with you. Oh, you know why? Because these are string values, and this is not a string. There we go. That's why. Now that should work. It won't know the value because it has to run it, because it's going to parse it in state. There we go. Man, I totally messed that one up. I hope you all caught that one. So let's run. And we're going to start over. We're going to say go. Now, I would have caught that by looking at the properties over here, but to me, it just didn't look right. And that's why the other one was airing out on us too. So there we go. That's what I expect that one to have. Okay. Now, notice we still didn't come over here. So, and I can tell you why, but I'm hoping that you catch on to it. So if false, so if this is not true, go here. Okay. So let's go ahead and run this. We're going to set, oops, I got to start it over. And then it's running. We got our list, and oops, we hit our error message. Now, if you know why, it's because the array is different in a JSON. In a JSON, this is a 0. This is 1. So book 1 did not equal this. I did that on purpose just to show you the error message. Now, with that, that's all an assertion is. Now, on the assertions, there's a lot of things you can do with it. So what we did, well, let's recap. So we created 2 properties. We actually created them on our property file. We actually created more than 2. And then with those, again, you can have many multiple property files, but only one active at a time. Okay. So just make one active. That's very good. A lot of people do that when they're changing different environments. So I can have as many of these as I want. I can copy this one and just change the settings. So if I have it set to production dev or whatever, and have a config file named that, then my live invocation server would be whatever it's pointing to, right? Because we're talking about service. Now, from there, we created a test. I showed you how to run the test and your VSI at the same time. So the easy way to do that, again, would be just whenever you do the test, stage your test, but give yourself enough time to, like, click over here and give yourself enough think time to actually, oh, it's because we deleted ad, and I was like, oh, what's going on? So give myself 20 seconds. And then I want my 2 to obviously be more than my other one. So here, this would give me 20 seconds if I run the test to go over to my service and kick off the ITR. So it's just a way to test it local, okay? The thing we did in here is we created 2 filters. This filter is a payload, okay? If you remember, that setting is the get the return, okay? This one, on the other hand, was a little bit different. This is actually a JSON path filter. This is the one I like, okay, because I can even do logic in it, which is really cool. They are a lot of filters. I recommend playing with the filters if you're interested in it. There's many, many different filters. Store step response is what we put in the payload. But there's a lot of things you can do. Stamp filter, and you can have more than one, as you can see. So there is a lot of filters you can add. If you're doing XML, if you're doing SOAP, whatever you need, they pretty much have a filter for it. And if the filters doesn't work, then you can get to scripting. Now, after this, so we look at our message. Our message, we grabbed the payload that was on the return. We grabbed our filter, and then we grabbed some global filters. Okay, and again, you could write all this to a log file instead of just doing the message here. Here in the scripting, again, if you were doing log, I think, oh, I showed you the other one, so that's right. So here we looked at get state value, okay, and we returned those in our scripting. Then from here was another one that we did just for kicks and giggles. Here we're writing to the log, okay, and then the log is going to write the value of the payload. And then here we're just returning books. Now, it may take me longer than I want to remember where these logs are. It wouldn't be in bin. Let's see. It's going to be, oh, you know where it is? It's here. And it's going to be in my users, my Tim, and it's going to be, there should be Lisa here. And then I just kind of filter by date. Today is 26th. And then let's see, 26, that should be in my workstation log right here. Okay, yeah, that's fine. And then here, if I do a control find, let's see, let's see if we can, I should have deleted this before I done this because I don't really, this is local, I don't really care about this. If I go up through here somewhere, I should see the payload right here. This is a demo from Tim. So there we go. So I wrote it to the log file. Now, there's a lot writing to the logs, okay? In other words, you can write to many different logs. You can set this to debug, warning, info. So that's really cool. Then from there, what we did was we created another test script. This one I only created, oh, that's one we're just looking at. I only created just so we can do an assertion on it. That's the only reason I created this one. So we created a message to say, oops, again, this can be written to a log. We ran into an error, so we wrote it to a log, okay? And I think there's actually an add to log script here. So there's a lot of things that, you wouldn't have to do in a code. Let's see, save to, so I know it writes to a delimited file. So there's a lot of stuff that you can do, right? So come in here and play with this stuff. You can't break it, right? I mean, it's yours. Don't play with production, obviously. And then from there, what we did is we did create an assertion. There are many, many different assertions. So hit add, again, you have many different options. We created the 3 JSON assertions, and I think you can look at these on support. It kind of gives you a little bit more. But there's a lot more that you can do with assertions as well. The only thing to remember about assertion is it has to return true or false, okay? So if it's false, it's going to go here. I did the false on purpose. So if I look at my assertion, I put the array as looking at the second value, which I know doesn't equal 895, okay? So what's saying that is kind of this piece that I wanted to cover, filters, properties, assertions. The one thing that I do want to talk about really quick, and then I'll let this go because I think we're getting to the end of I think this video's been long enough, is whenever you do it over here, I didn't do it here because it's really tricky to get through this spider web of events, and this is really easy to mess up. But everything I did over here, you can definitely do in here, okay? But you need to know where things are. So coming out of the listener will actually get you your JSON, okay? You can do that. And then from here, you have to look, this picks your environment. So if I'm doing a learning, if I'm doing a tracking, doing validating, then it picks where it goes, okay? So odds are you can put logic in here to say if this data does not equal 12, then call another live invocation, but you would have to build this out, right? So, and again, like tracking. So where that comes in at is if I go up here to here, and if I change one of these, well, what happened? Did we lose our service? Oh, you know what? I think I might have deleted it. But as you saw in the older ones, I did a video on it, I think. If you change your execution mode, that is what's actually driving these, okay? So all these little so if learning mode, if tracking mode, like this one, yeah, so this one automatically says return, this one, so it's your execution mode, and then it goes straight to here. So you'd have to know this path. But as you can see, there's assertions. There should be filters throughout here. Maybe, if not, you can easily add some. And you can add scripting in here as well. So just keep that in mind. I did it over here for sake of argument, not sake of argument, for sake of demo, just to make it quick and easy. But anything that can be done over here definitely can be done over here as well. The only tricky part, again, over here is just knowing this path and being able to modify this path. The problem is once you start adding things, this tries to get smart, and you have to pay attention to what it was before. and kind of link back to it in a way. So anyway, so I hope this video was useful. Let's go back and look at this real quick and then we'll end it. We talked about the filters, the assertions, and the scripting. We talked about how the filters are really tied to your properties, okay? Because filters really is just a way to display and move your properties. That's the way I look at it. And of course, you can put things in your properties. That's no big deal. So your assertions really is just a test, right? And a test has to return true or false. And they're usually just testing a value, right? Which again is part of your filters. Let's see. And then of course we talked about scripting. Now the scripting, we looked at bean shell and we looked at these commands, get, state, object, gets. So if I know it's a string value or if I know it's an integer, I can put it as an integer and treat it like math, right? So I can add to it, subtract and things like that that you can't do in a string. And again, if it's in a string, then I can do string things, maybe like concatenating. I'm not sure, I've never tried that. But an object means it's just, I'm not sure what it is, it's just an object. But parse and state means give me the value in runtime. Okay, that's pretty much what that means. So anyway, so I hope all this was useful. If you have any questions, please reach out to me. And I know this was kind of a long webinar, but there was a lot to cover. Hopefully in version 2 of this, we'll get more into scripting. If not, at least that was enough to get you started, I hope. Thank you very much.